clinical commissioning groups and the Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust, I'd like to welcome you to this public meeting to discuss the future of emergency services in the area. My name is Richard Horsman. I'm your chair for this evening. My day job is training journalists at Leeds Trinity University. Those of you with long memories may recall that I was involved in local radio with the original Pennine Radio and the Pulse in the 80s and 90s. So I'm now more involved with the teaching side of things. The theme for tonight, really, I think is going to be about communication and listening. We've got 8 people on the panel here. These are the people who are going to be making decisions about the future of something we all care passionately about. So I would like you to give them a fair hearing, and I would like you, when you're making your observations, I would like to get through 26 questions, if we can, in the course of this evening. Now let me tell you that there have been some 173 questions submitted. I've worked as an independent observer with members of the communications team, whittling those down into a number of themes, and we have picked example questions from each of those themes. I can't think of a fairer way of doing that. We've done the best we can in the circumstances to get those questions asked. So what we are going to do is I'm going to ask you, when you make your points, please, to keep everything as brief as we can, and then we can get through as much information in the course of this meeting as possible. The most important people here tonight, yourselves, the people of Kirklees and Calderdale who are going to be affected by these proposals. On the panel, we have got the people who are making those decisions on your behalf. So I would like the panel to introduce themselves, starting with Steve Ollerton.
Hello, yeah, I'm Steve Ollerton, Dr. Steve Ollerton, I'm the chair of Greater Huddersfield CCG and the GP at Skelmanthorpe.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alan Brooke. I'm a GP in Brighouse and I'm the chair of Calderdale Clinical Commissioning Group.
Hello, I'm Carol McKenna. I'm Chief Officer for Greater Huddersfield Clinical Commissioning Group.
I'm Matt Walsh. I'm the Chief Officer for Calderdale CCG. Good evening, everybody. My name is Owen Williams. I'm the Chief Executive of Calderdale and Huddersfield NHS Foundation Trust.
Hello, I'm David Hughes. I'm Senior Partner with Elmwood Family Doctors in Home Firth, where I've been for the last 29 years. I'm on the Huddersfield CCG, their urgent care lead.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Davis. I'm Consultant in Emergency Medicine at Calderdale Huddersfield Foundation Trust. I'm Clinical Director for Emergency Care.
Hello, my name is Jo Middleton. I'm a nurse. My job at the moment is I'm the Associate Director of Nursing for Surgery and Anaesthetics across Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust.
Okay, so that is your panel tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And the panel will be remaining seated tonight to take your questions. That's just simply for logistics with all the camera angles and things that are going on there. To start us off tonight, I would like to invite the panel then to make a brief presentation on behalf of the proposals that are being made.
The speakers are not heard at this side of the room. I think there's a fault with the PA.
Can you hear me? Is there a problem?
Sound check, please.
I'll just say, can you hear us over there? Is there any? That isn't me shouting, by the way. Right. Come away from those speakers. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Right. Let me grab. Oh, hang on. Okay, so I'm going to start off, then I'll hand over to David. As I say, he's our urgent care lead, and then I'll hand on to Carol. So, I apologise for those of you who've heard me speak before, but we have to assume there's people in the audience who haven't heard this. So, we're going to go through our proposed changes once again. So, at the top of our changes, we do want to fundamentally improve the way that emergency and urgent care and planned care services are done in Huddersfield and Calderdale. And that is mainly looking to the future because we feel our hospitals in their current configuration are not heading in the right direction, and we need to improve that, and that's going to involve some fundamental change rather than just trying to keep going along the current path. This will involve significant investments in the hospitals in both towns, specifically in Huddersfield, where there'll be a new proposed hospital, 2 state-of-the-art buildings. We are intending to build on our plans for care in the community. At lots of our events so far, I've heard about people's concerns with care close to home, taken those on board, and we know that before any changes occur, we must get care close to home working so that people have confidence in it. And I've heard that loud and clear. We need to make sure our hospitals meet national standards, and also we know that staff have been leaving our hospitals in the last year or two because they're not happy with the care that they can give. And so part of our proposals is to make sure that Calderdale and Huddersfield Trust is an attractive place to work. So whenever people say, you know, why are you doing this? These are the 4 reasons. I would actually have quality, safety and patient experience at the top of that list. That was fundamentally why we started this process. I've mentioned the staffing issues. We know that there's a growing, ageing and changing population. People are needing more healthcare, and we need to be able to address that. And finally, there are financial pressures, and we can't deny those, but that needs to be addressed. So these are the 4 main things. I'm now going to hand you to David to talk more about the proposed changes.
Right, I've got a lapel microphone.
Doesn't seem to be working. Any good? Is that working?
Yeah.
Right, excellent. So, next. I'm not used to CA, help? No? Right. You'll see there are 6 separate boxes there, which are the different areas that we're actually consulting on. And you'll note that not one of them has the word A&E in it. And that's actually because we're talking about an entirely new model as how we're actually going to provide urgent and emergency care over the patch, as well as a new planned care centre. So, next slide. Firstly, urgent care centres. At least 60% of people who at the moment are seen in an A&E department don't actually need the services of a specialist hospital. What we're proposing is that there will still be a walk-in service that will be called an urgent care centre in both towns, and this will be directly accessible by the public and also probably directly bookable for those that decide to ring 111 and are directed there. The second bit is the emergency centre, and this is the key. At the moment, we're in a situation where we have 2 A&E departments in neighbouring towns, and the acute services, such as medicine, surgery, trauma, are split between the 2 different sites. An emergency centre will have all the acute services on one site, supporting an emergency department. Now, the emergency department will be the new A&E, which is where people are taken with life-threatening illnesses by ambulance or sent by their GP. And then around that will be all the acute departments that are needed to make that work effectively. So medicine, surgery, paediatrics, trauma, and then all the investigatory services around that, like scanning and the path lab, X-ray, and the rehabilitation services such as physiotherapy will all be on the same site. And the coordination of that actually means that the sum is greater than the parts. Specifically, there will be a paediatric emergency centre, and this is new national guidance that actually children should be seen in a separate place and should be able to be seen by paediatric specialists when they're seriously ill. And this enables this to happen because at the moment we have the rather dark situation where, as a GP, if I see a child with abdominal pain and think they might have appendicitis, I have to send them to Halifax to see the paediatrician, who sends them to Huddersfield to have an operation because that's where the surgery is performed, in a hospital where there's no on-site paediatrician. This will mean that all these services are coordinated on one site. Planned care. At the moment, people will have experienced operations cancelled. And a lot of the time, that's because the bed that was going to be used for their surgery is taken up by somebody who's been admitted as an emergency. This will mean that we have a planned care hospital, state-of-the-art, 10 brand new operating theatres, 120 beds, which will provide much higher quality.
Who's paying for it?
Are you lucky? Which will mean that the planned surgery will be provided, I think, in a much safer and more effective way. Maternity services, unless anybody's particularly got objections, the plans are that they will stay exactly the same as they are at the moment, with a midwife-led unit in Huddersfield and a midwife-led unit in Halifax, plus the acute consultant-led unit in Halifax. Community services. We are in a very early stage of the care closer to home debate, where we are hoping to move increasing numbers of services away from the hospital to
Privatisation.
if you'd like to listen, I come from a family who all work. Well, if you don't want to listen, that's fine. So, what is urgent care? I can't listen to all of you at once. I was actually going to say, as far as privatisation is concerned, you will not find a better advocate for the NHS than me. All my family work for public services, and I am absolutely passionate about it. So, urgent and emergency care, which is what the most of the debate seems to be around. Urgent care is non-life-threatening illnesses where you can't wait for a routine GP appointment. These will continue to be provided in both towns. The emergency centre, as I have said, is for potentially life-threatening conditions where people may need to be admitted to hospital, and coordinating these services properly on one site will actually improve outcomes and reduce lengths of stay and probably reduce unnecessary admissions. And finally, so urgent care centres, these will be open 24/7, 365 days a year. They will be staffed by doctors and emergency nurses. They will have access to X-ray facilities, blood tests. They will have access to consultant advice through telemedicine to the emergency centre. And they will have resuscitation equipment as well. The emergency centre will be, as I've outlined, also open 24/7. It has all the acute services around it, so that includes all the acute medical and surgical departments. Finally, proposals, and I use the term advisedly, by location. So Huddersfield and Calderdale will both have an urgent care centre, they'll both have a midwife-led maternity unit, they'll both have day case and outpatients, and we are looking to more community-based health services on both sites. In Calderdale, we are proposing that is the site for the emergency and acute care and the paediatric emergency centre. And in Huddersfield, we are proposing the new planned care centre. I'll hand over. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I'm going to carry on and do the final part of the presentation. So, one of the things we've been asked about a lot so far during the consultation is why are you only consulting on one option and how many other alternatives did you consider? So, we'll say a little bit more about that as the evening goes on, but I just want to pick up a couple of points on that at this point. So, what we did was, and I think it's really important to emphasise this, we started with the clinical model. So we've talked in a number of places about why things can't remain the same and why the clinical model needed to change if services were going to remain safe and of high quality into the future. So our clinicians in the CCGs, along with the clinicians in the Foundation Trust, looked at what the clinical model should be like, how it should be designed, and they did that piece of work first. They did that before any work was done around what services might end up in which town. and the clinical model was designed in such a way that it could work either way round. So just wanted to get that sort of out there and up first. They looked at what the outcomes and the benefits for patients would be, and as I say, it involved clinicians from both the hospital and from both CCGs. We then had to look at how we deliver that model. You know, what services would you divide across the two sites? And we actually started with 11 options. They ranged from very little change to actually more radical reconfiguration than we're talking about tonight. So if you've had a chance to look at any of the detail on the 11 options, you'll see that some of the things considered, including actually trying to centralise all of the services in one town, for example. And we also did look at the option around a new build single-site hospital, which I know a number of you have asked us about. We narrowed them down. There was a variety of reasons why we couldn't take forward all 11, so we narrowed them down and we focused on 3. And we assessed each of those 3 against 5 criteria, and that's what brought us to the position where we're consulting you on the option that we're consulting you on tonight. So, the 3 options, that's the 3 options up there. It's a bit of a busy slide, but as you will look at it, you'll see that option 1 has the emergency centre and associated services in Halifax, with the Acre Mill site in Huddersfield being a purpose-built hospital dedicated to planned care, and that's the option that we're consulting on. The second option was basically the opposite way around, when that was one that obviously we gave serious consideration to. And in both of those options, both hospitals would have a 24/7 urgent care centre. The third option that we explored more fully was limited or no change. So those were the 3 that we narrowed down from the original 11 that we started with. So those are the criteria that we looked at. The criteria, I think those of you that have looked at the consultation document will have seen that. Down the left-hand side, there's the 5 criteria. You'll see that actually, I think what most people tell is the most important thing in all of this is maintaining quality of care. Quality and safety is paramount. You'll see that limited or no change was the one option out of the 3 that would not deliver that. So, in effect, that meant that's not an appropriate way forward. And as you will look at when you see the other 2 options between the emergency centre in Calderdale or the emergency centre in Huddersfield, you'll see that where the difference lay was in value for money in terms of the costliness of the options that were presented. So just to be clear, the reasons for change were about the need to maintain safe services. The clinical model came first. When cost came into the equation, thank you, you get one of them. When cost came into the equation, we were looking at the different sides. Thank you. All right. So, if I can just keep going, and this is the final slide. Okay. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. No, I'm happy to say a bit more about that. So, what value for money there really means when I'm sorry, sir, do you mind? I'm not trying to answer this lady's point.
Let's listen.
Thank you. What value for money means there is actually accepting that you would get the same outcomes either way, depending on whether or not you centralise urgent and planned services in either town. You then have to work out what it would cost in order to make that happen. And when we worked out what it would cost, how much money we would have to ask the Treasury for, and what that would then mean in terms of the ongoing financial viability of the trust, then that's where the difference lay. So recognising that in strained financial circumstances that we're in, it's highly unlikely that anyone is going to give us any money to do the more expensive option. So that's what we meant by value for money. Okay? Okay, if I can just keep moving. So the question themes. As we've gone through the consultation exercise, obviously we're picking up from meetings like this and the drop-in sessions that we've got, what some people's key concerns are. So those are the main sort of themes that we've put up there. I'm not going to try and answer all of them now, but the questions that we've got to be asked tonight will pick up on those issues that are coming through as the main themes. So just wanted to try and give you some reassurance that we will be addressing all of those issues. So I think that's the last slide from me, the only final one, if you wouldn't mind, Steve, is just, we'll just keep that up there for a bit to remind you of the website and how to get involved. So I'll hand back to Richard.
Thank you.
You're all right.
Right, so I think we want to get straight now into the meat of it, if you like, which is to address the questions that you have been asking. Now, a number of you will have questions that you have got on yellow cards that you're going to be reading out. One or two people have asked me to ask a question on their behalf, and that's the case with the first one that comes from Kate Lowe. Kate, are you here tonight? Yeah, Kate's at the back there. So Kate is asking, if the plans do go ahead, what order are you going to do it in? Presume that you're going to be extending Halifax, building the car parks, building the new HRI before closing the old one and knocking it down. And the question with that, what happens if you don't get the money? So, Howell, want to take that?
Can I just see who, did you say someone asked a question over there? Yeah, just to sort of roughly know who I'm looking at. I'll answer the last part first, if that's okay. So the question about what happens if we don't get the money. If a decision was taken that, you know, the clinical model is the right one and that's what we wanted to pursue, but the money wasn't forthcoming, then clearly if we didn't have the money, then the capital changes that would need to happen couldn't be done, so we couldn't progress with those changes. However, what we would have to then look at, or what colleagues in the Trust would have to look at, is any alternative sources of funding. Our preferred option is to look at the Treasury. So we would need to look at alternative options for that funding if it wasn't available through the Treasury route. If I can, I'll just answer this lady's question. If I can just turn to the second part of the first part of the question, in terms of the order that things would be done in. That piece of work would be done after any decision was taken, because we would need to then do a full business case, and part of that would be setting out the further work that needed to be done before any changes could be made, the sort of key milestones on the route to that change, and what I guess we would want to see in place before any changes actually happened. So we haven't done that piece of work just now that sort of puts into an order, you know, the car park, so what we would not do in the further down the line.
Okay, thank you. So, Kate, I don't know if you'd like to, are you satisfied with that answer? Is there anything you'd like to come back with? No, she's happy with that one. So,
if it's a business, we're all shareholders. And we're not liking what the board's doing to us.
Okay, we've got lots of questions to cover tonight, and we're going to work through them as best we can. So, I would like... Yeah, can we, no one can hear you, unfortunately. Can we please go on to our next question, which is... Can we get a microphone here, please? Microphone here, please. No, I think everyone will be able to hear if you just... I don't know if you just speaking clearer.
On radio leads this morning, you were telling Liz Green it's a done deal anyway. Yes, you were. I was listening to it. I don't think my husband was here. He heard it as well. It's a done deal. So why we're here tonight, God alone knows. We're all arguing for what's already sorted out.
A lot of issues that we want to cover, and that indeed is one of them. So,
Let me answer that.
okay, sure.
Certainly, I spoke to Liz Green and I emphasised that the decision on the consultation would not take place until October, that we had been speaking to people and had yet to hear, as Dr. Olsen also said on the radio, had yet to hear anything that particularly undermined our existing consultation. The consultation would be analysed over the 4-month period from the end of June 21st, and it will be on the basis of that that we would make our decision. So all we said was that we have not yet heard anything that changes the fundamental basis.
Okay. So now I'd like to invite Lee Wilson to ask a question. Mr. Wilson, Lee Wilson, would like to take the microphone, sir.
Thanks. It's very similar to what you've just said. Telling us you haven't heard anything that undermines your argument. It's flawed in so many places. And it's not just in the way you're putting it across. You are losing people, and you have very few friends in this room as a starting point. And I'm not wishing to say that to be clever or funny, just being honest.
Can we take a question, sir?
Okay. The first question is this genuinely a consultation? No. Please, is it genuinely a consultation?
No. Yes, that's it. Certainly it is. Yeah.
So
Judas one.
So I've said yes.
Okay, thank you. So a consultation is a two-way thing, where the people in authority and have the expertise who are yourselves, who I don't doubt as clinicians, but you listen to people, and effectively we are your patients. So you should listen to us. It isn't just your decision, okay? You listen two-way. So if it is a consultation, and you've agreed it is, and if it is two-way, which I hope also you agree it is, my next and final question is for everybody in this room. Would you please put your hand up if you agree with the proposal being put forward by the CCG?
Okay, can I come back to that? And it's an absolutely fair challenge. It's an absolutely fair question. You need to know that we've heard what you're saying. And well, with an open mind to an extent. So there are some limits.
You are our representatives.
You get that? So the limit in relation to the clinicians who've been involved in this conversation and who've been involved in designing the clinical model is that they need to believe that they can deliver something better for you. Okay? So the basis upon which this clinical model is being put forward is because it's the model that we've got most confidence can actually deliver something that is better, is safer in the situation that we've got. Now, just let me finish. Just as we need to listen to you, my personal commitment in this is that you'll see the concerns that you've raised articulated really clearly in any final business case that comes forward. You will be able to see the input that you've made into consultation, and we will describe how we're taking account of that and how we're shaping our plans to respond to that. But the bottom line is the clinicians involved in this process need to be able to be confident that they can deliver something safely for you, and that's where we're starting from.
You've not consulted with frontline staff, though. Can I just ask a question? You've not consulted with your frontline staff. You might have consulted with clinicians, but your frontline staff.
Frontline staff. Have you been dealing with frontline staff?
I could say that on the back of our surgical colleagues who were here last time, I went to a specific meeting with them a couple of weeks ago to try to address their concerns, and we've been to other meetings in the Trust on the back of the questions coming in the last few weeks. So this just shows how we are listening and trying to engage with more people and address their concerns.
Okay, well what I'd like to do now is to move on to one of the key issues, which I think we would all agree that one of the key issues is going to be the idea of movement between one centre and another. We have a number of questions on that area. So I would like to ask Jennifer Beaumont. Jennifer Beaumont. Could you come microphone to Jennifer, please?
Have you spoken to the homeowner?
Madam. Okay, madam. We have.
It concerns them as well.
Madam, we've got questions along to do with access, which will be coming later. Jennifer Beaumont, please.
Thank you. The road and the volume of traffic in the Linley and the Salter Hebble bypass area do not support timely access to emergency care. What is being done to address this issue, because one death due to distance does then discount the value for money cards.
Okay, speak on.
Thank you. And I have heard that question many times, and it is a concern that we have taken on board. We know that more than 50% of people who currently attend A&E will be able to be looked after in the urgent care centre. We know that the majority of people who access the hospital will go for the things that are in both hospitals, like day cases, outpatients, things like that. And also, we know from Calderdale Council that they have got major plans to improve the road infrastructure along their main carriageway. The A629. And my final point, because we have involved the ambulance service in many conversations in the working on these proposals, and the most important thing is the ambulance actually getting to you. Once they've actually got there, they start their treatment when you're in the ambulance, and taking you to a higher quality hospital is a journey that's worth making.
Thank you. Can we pick up on that point, because I've got a point that follows on from this. Dominique Burnett, please. Dominique Burnett. Dominique Burnett in the room. Okay, I'll ask the question. What happens to patients that need emergency medical treatment during busy traffic hours? It can be difficult enough to get to the HRI. How many lives will be lost during the extended journey to Halifax? Mark Davis.
Yes, I see many patients on a daily basis who come by ambulance, and I know that when an ambulance needs to get from Huddersfield to Halifax, it will get there damn sight quicker than I can in my car. So the travel time isn't so bad in the last The important thing that we need to remember is, like Steve just said, whether we like it or not, our emergency care begins the moment an ambulance gets there. The vast majority of patients who travel by ambulance to an A&E department at the moment, the ambulance has spent anything up to an hour on the scene of the incident or outside the house, sorting out the patient to get them safe to travel. So they don't come rushing into the emergency department, needing me to do something as soon as they arrive. We know that at the moment, the care that we provide in our emergency departments isn't as good as it could be. And that's because of the problems that we've described. Staffing, we've got services over 2 sites, so you get half the service on it. No, this is me a doctor speaking. You know, I'm a doctor speaking, and I'm trying to give you the best care I can. The current service configuration that we've got in Huddersfield and Halifax doesn't allow me and my team to provide the quality of care that we could do under this model. It's not possible to improve the board.
I would very much like to stay with that theme if we could. I would like to stay with that theme if we could, and ask about the arrangements that have been made for people who are elderly, people who have no transport and no family to take them from Calderdale Hospital or take them to Calderdale Hospital for appointments or visiting relatives. Also when they're being discharged. This is Beverly. Beverly Peace, is she here? Beverly, that's your question. So what concerns you? What's actually prompted this concern, Beverly?
situation with family.
You've been in that situation yourself?
Very, very recently.
Okay, so Joe Middleton, what are you doing about that?
You should be able to do it.
Sorry about that. Is that better? I think this is a really important question, and I totally agree when you're poorly. No, I know that, but when you're poorly, you want your family to be able to see you, you need to be able to travel across sites, and we do have some of this now, you know, people are moving between Calderdale and Huddersfield, but I think the really important thing from the point of view of this proposed model is that we'll be able to set something up where we work with you to get a better proposal for you. You know, what went wrong for you? What was so bad? Why wasn't he allowed on the shuttle?
Because he was told it was for staff.
Well, I mean, and it's that kind of thing that isn't okay, and we need to get that right. No, and I accept that totally. And I guess what I'm hearing is that it's not right now. So actually, this is
Right now.
no, but we can do something about it now. I'm not a fan of the shuttle bus. It makes me really.
My son was in Halifax, he
Yeah.
was 4:15, we were discharged from hospital, we had no way of getting home. They said because he was too low to meet the height requirements, their insurance didn't cover me, and I had to make my own way home.
So I guess what I'm hearing is these are 5-year plans, but there's something that we need to do about that now, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. No, but what I'm trying to tell you is that as part of the model, we need to set something up so that we hear your views, because clearly that's not happening now.
Well, clearly this is an area...
No, but in the plans, if you just 1 second, in the plans there's a proposal to set up a travel group that is full of people like you that have got different challenges that we need to hear about. But at the moment, people are still... As things stand today, you still travel between sites. Yeah, that's not okay. That's not okay. I totally agree. That's not okay.
Yeah, clearly this is the kind of issue that the panel need to hear about and are going to be able to take on board as they go to the next stage of the...
Can I just say one thing? Sorry. But I think it's really important to get some of the feedback from today, actually, because if it isn't right today, it's not going to be right tomorrow, and we need to get that sorted, regardless of everything that's happening now.
But I would like to stay on that theme. Okay, I would like to stay with that theme and on behalf of Christine Martindale. Christine, is Christine in the audience? Christine over there. Christine has asked a question which relates in part to what we just said. The consultation document states there will be an emergency centre which will have prompt access to specialist clinicians with the right skills for people with serious and life-threatening conditions, including trauma service. How will there be prompt access to people from places like Marsden, Hayes Edge and Denby Dale? Dr. Alan Buck.
We are aware that forming a single emergency centre will increase the average travelling time by a small but significant amount. The current time is just average journey time from any home to one of the A&E departments is of the order of just under 16 minutes. Average journey time by ambulance. If it was based at Huddersfield, that would go up to 21.5 minutes. Based at Calderdale, it would be just over 22 minutes. Now, we firmly believe that the most important time is for the ambulance to arrive to you. Effectively, the hospital comes to you and your treatment is initiated there. as said by Dr. Davies, you are stabilised. A decision is made where you will receive the best treatment, and you are then transported by ambulance. A small increase in journey time, and this has been confirmed by the ambulance, is much less important than the services that are available to you when you then come out of that ambulance. And that is the factor that will make all the difference. So the important point is that it is safer to travel longer in an ambulance if the best possible services are then available when you come out of that ambulance.
Okay, so Christine, can I ask, you've heard the answer to that question. Christine, are you satisfied with the response you've heard? Can we get a microphone? Can we get a microphone over to Christine, please? You don't want a microphone? But you
clarify that people who are seriously ill. Sorry, I thought it was finished.
An ambulance service got to a patient quickly and spent time with them in that ambulance, as you say, stabilising them, ready for a journey. You just don't know what journey on that bypass is going to meet you.
Okay, I think we can help you with this because we do have a specialist from the Yorkshire Ambulance Service with us tonight. Andy, you want to step forward? Can you introduce yourself to the audience first, please?
Good evening, my name's Andy Simpson, head of ops for Yorkshire Ambulance Service. The panel are right. When I started in the ambulance service 30 years ago, the most complicated piece of kit that I had was a blanket. 30 years on, we had a professional service. In my day, we took the patient to the emergency department for treatment. Nowadays, we have advanced paramedics, specialist paramedics, state registered paramedics, critical care paramedics, all trained to deliver. They're all trained to deliver the treatment that you need at the scene. So all patients get first-line treatment within the ambulance. The most important factor in terms of patient outcome is getting the patient to definitive care. Getting the patient to us. Sir, I've worked in West Yorkshire now for 30 years. Ellen Bypass is a busy road, there's no doubt about it. It is a bottleneck. So is Leeds Inner Ring Road, so is Bradford Ring Road. I'd like to assure the public today that a blue light ambulance has no difficulty navigating Salter Heaven. I can assure you, sir, it doesn't.
I'd like to pick up again on that point if we can, because we have another related question. Ladies and gentlemen, if we let the panel speak, you can get some answers to the questions that you're asking. I've got a question on behalf of Stefan Youngnitz. Stefan, are you in the audience tonight? Stefan? Okay. The travel analysis predicts that travel times are from a purely theoretical model. Would it not be prudent to validate the model's predictions with some testing of actual journey times? So, Carol, what do you respond to that?
Is this one on, is it? Yeah? People are shaking their head, I don't think they can hear me, can I use that? Okay. Please just answer the question that was put to me. The question that was put to me was about whether or not the modelling work that was done was validated looking at real ambulance journeys, and the answer to that is yes, it was. So with any modelling exercise, you do start off with a sort of computerised map, computerised model, and that will make certain assumptions. But what we did was we tested that against 12 months worth of real ambulance journeys that actually happened. So we were able to actually validate that the work of the model was correct.
What year was that
Okay, and again, picking up on that point with some more details, Stephanie Pogson. Stephanie Pogson. Yeah, can we get a microphone to Stephanie, please?
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hello, Stephanie.
Sadly, I've had cause to go to both accident and emergencies over the last 5 years of my life. One instance, it took 40 minutes for the ambulance at Marsh to get to me, a quarter of a mile down the road at Leadhall when I'd shattered my leg, and it took an hour and a half to get to Huddersfield Royal Infirmary. Another instance, I live in Berkeley, it only took me 20 minutes to get to Calderdale Roll, so I do know that there's discrepancies between travel times. But my key question here is that we're given this answer many times over, and there doesn't seem to be a non-biased point of reference with an independent body that has undertaken any studies to see the travelling time and to provide us with qualitative and quantitative research that we can focus on. 4 months ago I gave birth to my first child. It took me 1 hour and 40 minutes to get to Calderdale Royal from Berkeley. When you are in labour, or if you need to go to hospital, you don't always ring an ambulance. In fact, sometimes when you're in labour, an ambulance isn't offered to you because it's quite a run-of-the-mill thing that happens. But when it's an hour and 40 minutes to travel 6.5 miles, we need to have some independent investigation to back up the things that you're saying.
Thank you for that question. It is very relevant, and we're hearing issues like that as we've gone through this process. I just want to say that the work that's been done on travel times, either in an ambulance or by public transport, is work that we have commissioned independently. That's not work that we've done in-house. So either the CCGs or the Trust have brought in external parties to do that analysis for us. And they have worked with colleagues in the Yorkshire Ambulance Service as well to make sure that they can draw on the modelling and the vast amount of information that they hold within the ambulance service as part of doing that work. What we're also doing, if I finish my answer. What are we?
Engineering.
Sorry, yeah. In order to make sure that we're getting that as absolutely right as we can, we haven't actually just stopped with the work that we did before we started the consultation. We've recently commissioned another piece of work, just to do a final check to make sure that we're comfortable with the way that the impact of our proposals on the ambulance service, when put alongside the impact on the ambulance service of the proposals in the Mid-Yorkshire patch, to make sure that that all joins up and that we don't have gaps in Kirklees, for example, where people aren't able to access services appropriately. So we're doing that final piece of work now as well, and obviously that will be something that will inform our discussions when we come through to decision making.
I would like to ask, actually, if Alan is still, I'd just like to ask Alan just to add a comment on that possibly. Are you confident, sir, you've got to actually deliver this service at the end of the day, are you confident that these predictions are...
From an ambulance service perspective, we scrutinise the data, we design the specification, we also double checked it with our own internal services and external services, and it was a consistent outcome on all the reports. 10,000 hours equating to 10 extra staff, 2 extra ambulances to cover for the shortfall in extra journey time.
Okay. Stephanie, you've heard that. Stephanie, what's your reaction to what you've heard?
I appreciate the answer, and I understand that you have undertaken some consultation thus far, but one of my main concerns is that not everybody rings an ambulance. If it's accident and emergency, if my baby daughter at 4 months old was ill and I couldn't get an ambulance within 5 minutes, I'm 3 miles down the road, 2 miles down the road from HRI. My father lives in Birds Edge. I grew up between Birds Edge and Hayde Edge. When he came to visit me in hospital, it took him 2 hours, 15 minutes following the birth of his granddaughter to get there. Now, the ambulance service at times can be with me within 3 minutes. But at other times, as was evidenced when I broke my leg, it took 40 minutes to get 1/4 mile. So we need to have evidence of the alternative journeys that you're asking people to make, not just the journeys that you can track via one provider, which is the West Yorkshire Ambulance Service.
Can I just give my view to that point, if that's okay? Can everybody hear me? Can I just check, please? Okay, yeah. I think you raised some really good points, actually, because, you know, it's not just a question of the patients travelling, it's also friends and relatives, carers, etc. How do they get to these venues? And so all I would say is that I think you make some good points. We've just got to take that on board, and we've got to make sure that we've got some proper responses to that.
Okay, let's stick with this thing. Daniel James. Daniel James. Daniel's question was, will the CCG commission an independent review of ambulance travel times for the area covered? And that's Steve.
Sorry, I'm not keeping up. So yeah, an independent review. Okay. I mean, I think we've already discussed. Owen has given an honest answer there, and we were supporting with that. I mean, there's still an awful lot of work that with any of these proposed changes, and we're going to have a travel working group that will work on all of this, and we know that it is a major concern. But the thing is, as I've said before, I still go back to those 4 reasons that we want to change, and travel and transport is something that's going to facilitate that, and so we need to make sure that whatever we propose in the future, whatever happens in the future, is safe, transport's safe, and otherwise the model won't work, because transport's fundamental. So I take on board everybody who said that, and we will make sure that it's all, you know, that you have confidence that it's safe before any changes are made.
Okay, Anthony Brennan. Anthony Brennan. We've got Anthony here. Anthony Brennan, over here, please. Can we have a microphone to Anthony? We're staying with the ambulance, don't worry. Anthony, yes, your question, sir.
Will additional...
Please, can we...
Will additional ambulance services be purchased, and will Yaz have enough vehicles and paramedics to cope? Because they're not hitting the targets at the moment with hiring paramedics.
Okay, David.
Well, the answer to that is yes, simply. Can you hear me, or do I just need to shout? We're working with the Yorkshire Ambulance Service on this, and as Andy's already suggested, assuming that there are no other changes that happen whatsoever, we're looking at an additional 10,000 hours of ambulance time that would be required over 12 months. And with my... Do you want to listen or do you want to shout? I mean, it's up to you. Like, I can't talk when somebody else is talking, so if you want to talk, then that's absolutely fine by me.
Can we let David speak, please? David, let's continue.
Right. I'm quite happy to discuss, but there is no point in shouting at me in the middle of talking, because nobody can hear, neither me nor anybody else in the audience. 10,000 hours a year, by my simple maths, is 33 hours a day, thereabouts. So we're talking about a significant additional amount of ambulance, but not a vast additional amount. We are doing a lot of other work with the ambulance service in particular to actually reduce the number of people who are transported unnecessarily to hospital. At the moment, about 30% of people that are taken to the A&E department by ambulance leave with no treatment. That is a waste of the patient's time, it's a waste of the hospital's time, and it's certainly a waste of Yorkshire Ambulance Service's time. And
David, please.
What we are suggesting, and what is actually already happening, which is aside to this consultation, is a process where we're working with Yorkshire Ambulance over the whole of West Yorkshire to actually improve the services that the paramedics are able to provide in people's homes, to mean that they don't have to be taken to hospital. And actually also to increase the services that are available for the original call handler when people ring 999 so that if it is something that is more appropriate than a blue light ambulance, there are other services that we can actually use which will be better for the patient.
Okay, Anthony, give your reaction to that.
Can I ask if the clinicians that worked on the design of the proposed model had any input into the design of the Titanic? Because all I could see are icebergs.
Let's say it is topic of ambulances.
If you're implying that we're doing this for our own good, I'm doing this because actually I believe it's the right thing to do for my patients, who I've been working with for 29 years. Well, what if you're wrong? I believe that I'm right. I've actually been working on this with many other colleagues for the last 3 years plus. And whether you like it or not, the present situation is not sustainable. It's not safe. And actually what we're trying to do is to provide a model of care which will provide better, safer care for the population of both towns.
Okay, let's try and get some more facts on this if we can. Let's try and get some more factual information. Andy Walter, please. Andy Walter. Andy Walter. Andy's question. What arrangements are going to be made to ensure emergency ambulances can make the journey without delay from Huddersfield to Halifax, as currently they get blocked in traffic at the bottom of Ellen? Mark?
I think, yes, I think you're quite, I think that's it. That question has already been answered. What I'd like to... Go ahead.
Can all of you guarantee that no lives will lose? No.
I'll answer you, but I'll just ask you, let me finish speaking before you interrupt, okay? Yeah. I can't tell you that nobody will die on the Ellen bypass. But I can tell you that the service they get when they get there will be significant.
Let's look at the cost of this service.
I work. Can I just finish? Care that we provide at the moment in the A&E department at either Huddersfield or Halifax isn't as good as it could be because of the problems we've described earlier in terms of staffing, in terms of changing the population. I can talk to you after this.
Well, let's see if we can look at some of the costs of this. Roger Gill. Roger Gill. Yeah, gentleman here, please.
My first statement might not be too popular with the audience, but I believe I do have some sympathy with the benefits of scale. So your medical solution might have some benefits. Unfortunately, the answer is the wrong one. If I can refer to some information that's come to me since the question was submitted, I saw a government leaflet this weekend entitled Consultation Principles 2016. It includes in its second paragraph, consult about policies or implementation plans when the development of the policies or plans is at a formative stage. Do not ask questions about issues on which you already have a final view. Since Dr. Ollerton has been very firm in saying there's no plan B, then this is not a consultation, it's a selling exercise. And even later information, today's Examiner headlines estimate the cost of the plan at £276 million. It only requires, and I've been experienced in planning to some degree over the years, it only requires a small deviation from this estimate in in any range of things to obliterate any possible savings over the original medical case, which I think I could go along with the medics in the medical case, from having major A&E in the biggest town, where there are most people. Many of the reasons you've given for supporting your plan deserve much more searching examination than can be given here tonight. Now, my actual question that I started with, again we're back to ambulance services. Ambulance service increase costs do not appear to be included in that £276 million. So the overall cost of the taxpayer, and there are taxpayers, that's us, of this scheme, is not complete, not being considered. We've talked about, or you've talked about for a long time about journey times and things like that. The study that you referred to, I had a look there, in some small print somewhere, there were words like extreme journeys were excluded. So Head Edge and that were excluded because they might sway the results. Our friend, the doctor there, talked about average times. Wonderful to talk about averages for anything, but in where we are today, it's the extremes that matter just as much as the average. I did an exercise on this one Saturday afternoon. It took me a couple of hours, using the distributed population of Greater Huddersfield and Calderdale and the 2011 census figures based on the parliamentary, the council wards, and it shows that A&E, a single A&E at Huddersfield requires 50% less additional ambulance hours than does the A&E at Calderdale. And I estimate that you've talked about 10,000 hours.
Sure, we are covering quite a lot of ground here, sir. Can I ask you
That was the main part of my question, that how do you justify these costs when you haven't considered the ambulance?
Okay, so
I still have part of my submitted paper.
If you can do it briefly, sir, please.
How can you justify it? And I just mentioned planned care. I've seen it somewhere in the small print that urology is going to be at Calderdale. I have to declare an interest in that I'm a urology patient and I go regularly to Huddersfield. Is that planned care going to go to Calderdale then? If so, what other misinformation is there hidden in the small print?
Okay, Owen Williams.
So, Roger, thanks very much for the question. There's a lot of legitimate points I think that you raised there. I'll try and do as many bits as possible if I can do. I'm sure if I miss anything, you'll let me know. We've already had the conversation already today about what the ambulance service judges to be, what its additional requirements would be. Again, you know, be quite open with you. Some of that we will not know, will we, until this actually gets implemented. So I'm not going to sit up here in front of you and make guarantees, okay? Because I want to be straight with you. So we've got some work to do around that, as far as I'm concerned, to really understand what does this mean for us. And when I say we, you know, we've got clinical commissioner group colleagues here who will be having that conversation, because we as a provider are like the ambulance service ourselves. So we will have to wait to understand where those negotiations take place. But it is the case, and I think I can speak for the ambulance service and I think I can speak for ourselves, because there's a number of people in here who've talked about poor management, okay? And I think it's unfair on the doctors and nursing colleagues and therapists for them to be taking that question. I think for myself as chief executive, it's quite right that I take that sort of question. And if people have issues about management, what I would say is there is not now, I think there is only 2 trusts in the country now that is not now carrying a deficit. Now, whether that's good, I will come, if you don't mind, Roger did take a bit of a thing, so I want to try and do a little bit of this because I have an opportunity to speak much tonight. So we're in a situation whereby the money situation that we have, right, is absolutely unprecedented. Okay? So it's not like it's been before. And I know that part of the feeling is wouldn't it be great if we could just keep the services as they are, and if we could have more money for doctors and nurses on the current configuration. That's the feeling that people have in the room. And the request that we've had is very much about, why don't we go back to government and say, we need more money? Is that right? Okay. Part of the challenge we've got, and it's unfortunately we've not got, I don't know if we've got any representatives in terms of political this afternoon, but one of the challenges that we have got is that money for paying for existing models of care is not there. Okay? That's nobody in this room's fault as to why that situation occurs. So let's just do about the 276 million. Let's just do about the 276 million. So 276 million pounds is towards the capital cost of an overall envelope that we're talking about here of just under 500 million pounds. That seems an incredible amount of money when we just said, well, the government are saying they haven't got any money. What the government will do is if they can identify different models of care, they will be prepared to listen to opportunities or ideas about how different models of care can be given. But, and this is the thing I have to be honest with you about, they aren't going to support more money going to existing models of care. Nobody on this panel likes that situation. You certainly don't like that situation, but I want to be as honest as possible with you about the reality that we're having to face to try and do as much as we can to ensure that you get the services that you deserve. So I'll just make this final point. Just in terms of Roger's point about the various services, I think it's on page 19 of the consultation document, and also very, very clearly on the website about what services we will be proposing to be on the planned care site and the unplanned care site. So that language that you've used there, that information is variable. Could I please plead with you, if there are any services beyond urology where you think, actually, we're not being very clear about that, if you could let me or the consultation team know about that, I want to make sure that we get those answers to you. Thank you.
Right. And I would like to continue along.
All right, can I talk about that question, if that's okay? So, there is 274 million, which would largely be about capital costs. So that would be capital build of whatever facilities would get built on one side and also the additional facilities that would get built on the other side. And then there's another 250 million, which is about supporting the trust through this transition and change. And that is also about making sure that we can pay people's wages and so on and so forth. So that's how the split of the money goes. But just to give you a scale about where things are at, does anybody know Smedic in the West Midlands? Yes. Okay. So building a new hospital at this moment in time, okay, £588 million, okay, 370 million on capital for 674 beds, okay. Well, this is what I'm trying to say to you is, for us as a group of people, we would love to be in a position where when we looked the Department of Health, NHS England, NHS Improvement and the Treasury in the eye, that they were going to be seriously taking our propositions on side. But we know, okay, that if we're into a situation where they judge it that it's not value for money, okay, we know that they will say no. So this is where we come back to. This is where we come back. Yeah, let's come back to the done deal bit. Sorry, I'm conscious I'm taking a bit of time here, but I'm talking. Okay, so if we talk about the done deal, all I can say to you is, and it goes back to Natalie's question earlier about frontline colleagues who've actually been involved, because I certainly know that as far as our trust is concerned, I've been face to face with frontline colleagues talking about this for nearly 3 years, okay? And it's absolutely the case, and I'm really, really quite passionate about this, that somehow we have to come to some changes in the way that we do it. But you should not believe that your views, your input, and what you feel is just going to get disregarded. It is not. It is not going to. What I want to make sure is I get people feeling angry, and I want people to feel emotional about their services, because it makes me feel proud about the doctors and nurses who are providing the services.
Fight for you, then.
No, we're fighting. This is the point. We're fighting with you. Yeah, tell the government, I might be getting the BS detected, okay. Tell the government, no. Address the underfunding. I would just say that here, okay, there are not people who can directly influence what government does. We are in a democratic society here, okay? Let's call it as it is. We're in a democratic society here, and there is an opportunity for people to exercise their influence over government. And I'll only make that final point. I am sorry that I went on too long. I haven't spoken enough. Sorry.
There's a problem. There is a problem. There's a problem, and you're missing it.
Yeah.
If you're going to go looking for money and things, and you're going to look at, I respect these people as clinicians, and I don't want anybody to believe that I and other people in here have got some negatives about our ambulance service, because they do a bloody good job. So let's not pour that. What we're talking about is the inefficiency of these people, not clinically, but just a little bit of information. And I'm addressing this to Calderdale, right? 2013, the PFI thing, which Steve Ollerton said to us last time when we met here. He said in no uncertain terms that was probably the biggest issue on the finance side. And we're all aware of that. The 20-odd million that's going to grow each year. But what about what you're doing now? Let's just think about that PFI thing. There's a percentage of the income from Calderdale, and presumably everybody now with us in Huddersfield, that goes towards paying that back. And in 2013, it was 10% of what Calderdale were dishing out. 10% of its income was going on that, against a background where, in a survey done by the Nuffield Trust, the worst were between 1.5% and 5%, against a national median of 0.9%. Right? So that's a starting point about where you're at. But let's look at something a little bit more recent. That contract for PFI is no longer in the hands of the people who bid for it, is it? No. It's now in the hands, and I better not misquote them, it's now in the hands of a French company called GDF Suez, who've just renamed themselves Energy. Okay? I hope you're taking this notice, because you need to discuss this at your next meeting. Because last year, the Calderdale Group decided to award a contract to somebody called Kiwi Power. You remember it? You awarded a contract to Kiwi Power. You must have overseen it, or checked the books, or looked at the accounts. And that Kiwi Power is part owned by Odia Energy. Now,
okay, can I ask you to make a point?
What you're in is a situation that you're in the stuff, aren't you? And you said that last time, and you've prated around other issues as you did last time, and you've done it all the time, and you've tried to divert. You were the ones who selected the questions for tonight. So some things have been neatly missed. 4 questions on the ambulance thing when our colleague from, ambulance service gave a bloody good answer early doors, didn't he? So, if you're managing your business at the moment in a particular way, and you've got involved with some companies, I mean, who's ultimately going to be involved? Philip Green? Or somebody that nature? Are we going to move into PHS? And the last thing, as we're in this stadium, when the team's not doing well, as our colleague at that end keeps telling us, they're not doing well, these football teams get rid of the manager.
Another fundamental question. Michael Fosbrook, please. Michael Fosbrook. Can we have a microphone to Michael, please? Michael Fosbrook.
How is Smedic being funded? PF2?
Yeah.
Yes. You always took as an example. You never mentioned it. So you're talking about the government giving you this money, which is I don't like.
Okay.
You can't go to the open market.
Okay, can we please move on? I think we've covered...
So if you recall, the last public session we talked about, I said there was potentially 3 routes. I said there was a route whereby there might be direct capital sum that comes via Treasury, stroke Department of Health. There might be permissions that we're given as a trust or a wider board to borrow more commercially on the market, or there might be, and I'm just waiting for it now, there might be PFI2. Okay? Right? But I'm just answering the question. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's been dealt with. Can I ask Michael Fosbrook to put his point, another fundamental point on this proposal, please?
I should put a sales A&E department transferred to Halifax, the lesser of the 2 populations.
You're like a straightforward A&E department to transfer to Halifax, the lesser of 2 populations. Owen Williams.
Okay. Right. So, again, we quite rightly, people are talking about accident and emergency A&E as we know it. As was said earlier, part of what we're trying to develop here is a different way of providing that care. Okay? I just want to talk about our boundaries. I just want to talk about the trust boundaries. Okay? Okay, just very, very quickly, you know, Calderdale and Huddersfield NHS Foundation Trust covers a CCG area in Calderdale that is about 210,000-ish in population. And we cover what is called Greater Huddersfield. In terms of the whole of Kirklees, in terms of the whole of Kirklees, that is split between ourselves and Mid Yorks Hospital Trust. Okay? So just in terms of the bigger population, so what you can say is that Greater Huddersfield population is bigger, by my account, by about 40,000 than that. So I've heard people talk about 400,000, 500,000. What I'm saying, and I think Joe said this right at the beginning, what we do is we serve that populace. We serve that populace.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. But I'm just saying in terms of trying to understand the areas that we cover an area that is Calderdale and is also Greater Huddersfield. And what we're proposing in this model is a new and different model of care that will have, in the 2 areas that we've currently got sites and locations, it will have urgent care facilities. Those urgent care facilities will deal with, I think it says in the document, at least 53% of what we know currently comes to what we call A&E. There will be a single emergency care centre, and I'm not rehearsing it again, but that's where, particularly if it's a blue light service, that's where you will go. Or equally, because somebody's made this, and I think there was a point that was made earlier, so what happens if it's not a blue light? What we will have to have in place are the right protocols to make sure that if somebody falls ill, and they might have just come in just for the chest pain, but we might suddenly then diagnose, actually this is quite serious, there has to be the right protocols then for those people to be transferred. But as Joe talked earlier, those transfers are taking place today. Today, those transfers are taking place.
Okay,
so that's just described the answer.
Michael, you've heard that. Would you like to give a response to that, please? Michael Postock, your response to what you've heard, please.
All right, so again, what colleagues have talked, sorry, I don't want to repeat too much, but what colleagues have talked about is that when we've looked at the clinical models and the clinical care, what we haven't been able to, you know, it could be either site, either location. What is well, I'm just about to get to that. Okay. What is the fundamental challenge that we've got? The fundamental challenge that we've got is a PFI. Let's deal with it. We can do the fault, we can do the blame. I know you might have those views. You might have those views. You might have the views it's not Huddersfield's fault. You might have the views that it's anti-Calderdale. All I'm just saying is, and it's to the question about management, yeah, where the people who, whatever the decisions that are made in the past, where the people have been left to try and work this through, given the reality that we've got now. Okay?
Okay, well, one more detailed point that's come now from Ryan Uckley. Ryan Uckley, and Ryan has asked that I put the question for him, and that is, what with the current hospital configuration, opening up elective care beds is possible in order to accommodate for excessive emergency cases who present to A&E at either hospital. With the new plans, how will the new hospital centre cope without this resource when large influxes of emergency cases are taken to the hot site and there are no emergency beds left to accommodate the patients? Joe Middleton.
Okay, sorry. I mean, sorry, was it Ryan? It's absolutely right. This is happening every single day. This is the kind of thing that people like me have to cope with in terms of the messages that we give to our patients. Only last week I was having to ring people that were due to have a planned hip operation. I had to speak to a little lady who'd got a dog in a kennel. She'd got herself sighted to come to hospital, and I had to cancel it because we were putting emergency patients into that bed. I understand the concerns that there might not be enough capacity, but this, I'm trying to, this, and I don't think the way that we're doing things now is sustainable. We have to look at the, I'm trying to answer the question, just bear with me 1 second. We have to look at doing things differently. We can't just keep accepting more and more people into our hospitals. We've got to try and help people stay healthier at home so that their chronic conditions don't get worse. We've got to look at people in primary care to see if we can put more things in community. We can't just keep accepting more and more people through our doors. So as it stands today, the way that we do things, I would be really worried about this because we wouldn't have a plan B in terms of where we would put people. But this is in the context of a proposal for a different way of doing things. This is about trying to help people stay healthier, trying to give them support to self-manage and trying to put more care into community. Which bit of the, who shall we answer the question? Which bit of the question do you think? And I also really think, you know, I have these conversations with patients every week. It's just as important that if you've got a planned or elective procedure that you get that care as well. I think those people deserve to have care in our hospital just as much as people that turn up to A&E and have got an emergency condition. And I think with what happens at the moment, I'm on call on Wednesday, and I know for a fact if there is a locum doctor working in one of our A&E departments that we are more likely to have a higher number of admissions into our beds because those locum doctors don't know what's in our community. They're more risk averse, so they're less likely to send people home. So actually the impact of that is that we do have an influx in terms of emergency admissions. So this is about having our own doctors in that emergency centre that can make those decisions, know what's out there in community, and actually we will hope to admit less people into our beds.
Well, we're staying with the fundamental question, if you like. Fundamental question, and one from Rachel Lilly. Where's Rachel, please? Rachel Lilly. Hand at the back there. Can we hear from Rachel? Microphone over to the far side.
Hiya. Firstly, just with regards to travel times and the 16 minutes, I live in Halifax, just outside the town centre, and when I was in labour, I did not get there in 16 minutes, so you're quite wrong there, guys. Secondly, can I have no fluff with my answer? Just an answer will do. Thank you very much.
Can you ask the question, please?
My mother said, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them with caution. So that's my advice. My question is, the CCG admitted that the impact will be greater on vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, therefore penalising those who need the most help. How is this going to be addressed, and are you going to wait until afterwards like everything else?
Alan Brook.
This is an area that we are making extensive investigations into. So we've got a lot of people working with smaller groups, but we are confident that none of these proposals will actually be other than advantageous to all groups of the population. What has not been covered tonight so far is just as important, and that is care close to home, care outside of hospital. So we have been talking very much about hospital-delivered care, and we know that in this country we are far too dependent upon things being done in hospital. Now, more care closer to home will be a particular advantage to people who are disadvantaged. They will be able to access these things much easier than having to go to 1 or 2 centres. So we believe that although the challenges for some groups in society are greater, that we are addressing all of these in this proposal.
Okay, Rachel, you asked for a straight answer. Are you happy with that?
Not at all. When I went to the Salby Bridge drop-in session, I was specifically told that a lot of the weight from the proposals, if they were to go ahead, let's just remember that word, would fall on care in the community, which includes some charities. So why are you expecting already breaking services under a lot of strain to take on all this extra work when you're borrowing nearly £500 million? Yeah.
We can do a lot more for people if we use the hospital less and we deliver services closer to home.
Okay.
Well, until you can tell us how those services
agree with the proposal to downgrade Huddersfield A&E, but our concern is that there's been no real formal consultation with ordinary staff at both sites. I don't think going to see a few surgeons, Dr. Alton counts. Do the views of frontline doctors, nurses, healthcare assistants, porters, cleaners, admin staff, paramedics and others not really matter?
Mark Davis.
So I can answer this because I am a member of staff as well as doing this as a sideline. I'm a member of staff, and I know that myself and all consultants in Calderdale Huddersfield Trust were invited to be involved in an engagement process before the consultation. So that's the consultants. I know that every member of staff has had information about the consultation and an invitation to get involved in the consultation attached, because every member of staff got it attached to their payslip, and I'm pretty sure that every member of staff reads their payslip. I know that every member of staff has been invited to drop-in sessions, and I've been and delivered a talk to 3 of those drop-in sessions where there have been frontline cleaners, porters, nursing staff, healthcare professionals there. So I've seen these people being involved. I walk past a consultation desk in the main entrance of HRI every day, where it's quite clear that all staff are invited to put their views on paper and to be involved in it. So all staff at CHFT are being engaged in this process. Whether they choose to voice that or not is their decision, but they are being requested to.
Okay, Rachel, you have a response to that. Rachel?
I'll come back and stand regional and organiser for Unison in that
Okay, Rachel, are you happy with your colleague to be involved? Yeah. Okay, so can you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, my name's Natalie Ratcliffe. I'm a regional organiser for Unison, the trade union. There's just basically a desk that's in the entrance hall to Calderdale Royal Infirmary that I've never seen anybody stood at. There's also a desk that's in the canteen which I've never seen anybody stood at that's just got leaflets and surveys on. The only people that's encouraged any participation in this consultation, I'd say, is the staff side unions and the HandsOffHRI campaign, which have consistently asked people to fill in surveys. Just to finish with, what I would say to people in this room is, you know, if you are in favour of this proposal, I would remain seated. But if you're not in favour of the proposal, because we're not going to hear any more decent answers for them other than what we've heard before, then I suggest that we leave the room now.
Well, I would suggest is Stuart Neal. Can we have Stuart Neal? Stuart? Okay. Can we get a microphone for Stuart?
It's great.
If you really want to walk out, ladies and gentlemen, obviously it's your decision, but there are people going to give you answers tonight.
Hello? Listen, before you all depart, just 1 second. Won't take long. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. You morons. You don't listen, you morons. Listen. Listen, the last time I came, I raised a question and I really didn't get an answer. I'm a retired NHS worker. Also, the branch secretary, or was, of the whole of Kirklees NHS unions. Now, I know, past experience, that when we look back historically, all the changes that have taken place in Huddersfield and Halifax have been motivated by money. Despite what anybody says, it's a fact. We all had our own health authorities, and then they amalgamated. Then the services went downhill. However, having said that, the panel is right. We do need a change. Among the options examined was a new build, which would involve the building of a new hospital, delivering all services on an alternate site. And this would be in line with the clinical model. It will provide safer, higher quality services with a 24-hour consultant-led, undisturbed plant care with a more resilient workforce model. A new purpose-built hospital situated on Lindley Moor would be halfway between Calderdale and Huddersfield and would remove the opposition from all sides. Having all the staff from both hospitals would resolve staffing shortages and would enable the movement of staff from one area to another to cover any sickness, etc. While the inclusion of an ambulance service would be admirable, having the benefit of services all on one site. I do realise this would require capital investment, but the long-term results would be patient-led service, which would be fit for purpose, which would have been built not just for the current population, but the estimated demographic population for the future. So with all this in mind, my question is, on what evidence, true evidence, did you base your decision that funding would be highly unlikely to be provided?
Dr. Alan Brooks.
We have indeed looked at the option of a brand new hospital to replace all of them. We believe that would be prohibitively expensive. It will leave the problem that you all have a problem with, which is the PFI hospital. It would still, for the next 30 years, be required to be financed and used by the NHS. And we have been told in no uncertain terms by Monitor, the national body, that that hospital must be used to its full potential, because it is a state-of-the-art hospital and the best of many miles. Now, faced with that, why would we attempt at fantastic expense to build a new hospital just, I reckon, I've looked it on a map, about 3 miles away? How does those 3 miles make such a difference to people's vision here? It'd be a single, 3 miles from the current site at Calderdale Royal to Lindley Moor. So I think the people who are proponents of, and that's on the road, that's on the road, no, that's on the road, I've put it on the road, I've worked it out. So it's interesting that the proponents of this have accepted the clinical model of the need to centralise all the services on one site. And I think that's certainly where a lot of the clinicians got to, and really the consequences of where that happens is something that we then had to work through over the latter half of last year. But I think I have to find the answer back. Would you want an urgent care centre in the 2 towns? No, 2 extra urgent care centres. So you'd have an emergency hospital somewhere in the middle, which we don't think we can get the money to build, and then you'd obviously want an urgent care centre. Neither of them would actually then be on the same site as the emergency centre. So the model has its attractions, but it certainly doesn't answer everything, and it probably would mean that you wouldn't get an urgent care centre in either town. It would all take place at the one site. Now, if that is very much more attractive, then that's something that could be looked at. But it really has been dismissed as being so unlikely to be funded that there's no point in actually misleading you to believe that it could be.
Okay, Stuart, reaction to that?
It really wouldn't matter, because if you're coming from Huddersfield to go to Calderdale, or you're coming from Calderdale to go to HRI, the distance is immaterial. The traffic problems will always remain. You have to do something about that. But I agree with Owen that we do need, as a populace, to actually protest, as we are doing outside, but not just to you guys. We need to get in touch with our MPs and with the government and make them do what we want. It's our voice, it's our services. They're all about what they care about. This government, and I'm not necessarily pro-Conservative or Labour, but this government is saying they support the NHS. Well, then approve it.
Okay.
And as regards that little bit there, you've got a vast expanse of land. It's not going to interfere with anything at all. You can sell off all your products at hospitals, because the travelling time either way is either here or there, and you can realise the potential in all those developments that you've got, because you won't have that problem anymore. You won't have that hospital. You could sell it off. You could develop that. You wouldn't have HRI. You could sell that off. If you've got all services on one site, if there's a problem with staffing, and there's always a problem with staffing, you've got more staff on site. Unless you don't staff it like you are doing.
Okay, Stuart, thank you very much indeed. And I'd like to pick up on that. We've had reference to PFI from a number of quarters already. And Carol Booth. Carol in the audience tonight? Carol, yeah. Carol has asked me to put this question to you on her behalf. Can evidence be provided by the panel that the decision has not been wholly centred around PFI, the contract that was signed by Calderdale, rather than around the human impact? Carol McKenna, I think, to answer.
Okay. I'm just going to say a few words on this actually, because I think we've covered some of it, but I want to just put a little bit of part of my own perspective and part of the CCG's perspective onto it as well. So in terms of the other criteria that we looked at when we looked at all the options, we covered them in the earlier presentation. And I think Owen's been really frank with everyone tonight in terms of setting out the position that we're in with regards to the PFI. And the fact that while none of us in this room might like that situation, you know, we have a job to do to try and make the best of the situation in which we find ourselves. But if you think back to those options that I put back up earlier, and you saw that either of those clinical models could deliver the criteria around quality and accessibility that we're trying to achieve. But the one difference was in cost. Well, if we were to be pursuing, let's even just imagine that we could go to the Treasury and say we would like the money for the more expensive option, which is Huddersfield as the emergency centre. On capital costs alone, that's an additional £30 million. Now, if you consider that money, sorry, just let me finish my train of thought. If you think about that £30 million, you think about the totality of the money we're asking the Treasury for, and the fact that that money will have to be repaid. If we're going to find, you know, if we were to find an additional £30 million over and above what is the less costly option, that is money that will come from services that are currently being delivered to the people of Calderdale and Huddersfield. So this question asked me about human impact, and I think that's where the human impact is. It's about having to cut, and that's the right word, it's about having to cut another £30 million worth of services to enable us to pay for a more expensive option that actually would not make any difference to the outcomes that are delivered. And those are the kind of hard decisions we're facing, and I know they're really hard decisions. But for me, you know, and you know, we all talked at the last public meeting about how we've used local services. I don't want to see us having to lose £30 million worth of services if we don't have to. Not when we can actually deliver something that we've talked about as being state of the art and will deliver people a better service than they will have in the long term if we do nothing.
Okay, I don't know, Carol, do you have a reaction to that? Can we give the gentleman a microphone, because that's on this point?
Sorry, you're saying it's going to cost £30 million extra to develop Huddersfield, but you own Huddersfield.
Exactly.
The extra money that you're putting into Huddersfield will benefit people in not 20 years' time, not 50 years' time, but 100 years' time. You sell Huddersfield's site and it's gone. And then after 20 years or 30 years, whatever you're talking about, when this PFI deal is up again in Halifax, you've got to go to your landlords and say, how much is it going to cost now to rent the premises off you again? You already own the premises.
Yeah, so whatever happens, so whether it's we own the premises, what we're sat on at the moment in terms of Huddersfield Royal Infirmary, as has been also been documented, is quite a significant backlog in the state of that building at this moment in time.
Yeah, well, have your head in shame?
Yeah, I think that is a good point, because that's just not happened overnight. That has been happening quite a number of years, and I have to say to you that it has certainly been my experience of the board since I've been there in the 4 years, that there's been a real commitment to try and make sure that the investment that we can afford does get into that HRI building. Because I know that there has been some complaints about, well, if we knew X, Y and Z about HRI, why have we been trying to spend money on its infrastructure? Well, quite frankly, we've had to, in some way, shape or form, not just about health and safety, but things like fire safety as well. Things that you would expect in a modern day public service should be at the right standard. So there's no doubt that we've had to make some investment in there. And I'm just coming back to the question about, you know, a single site or whatever else. What we still have to deal with is dealing with, if you don't use Calderdale, then as a minimum, the mortgage payment, because I think everybody understands that language, the mortgage payment is £10 million a year. So if you're not going to use it, and it goes to 2060, so if you're not going to use that site, you are committing yourself to the minimum of those payments, okay? No, but sorry, I think your question is, we own some land, and I think there's a question about whether we own it or whether it's actually owned by the Department of Health. But let's just work it through and say it is the trust that actually owns that site. it belongs to the Department of Health ultimately. So, you know, our ability in this arrangement, whichever way we look to do it, there will always be a situation whereby government will have a say over what happens to the assets. Council colleagues will tell you, people working in the NHS will tell you right now, there is a universal ask from the centre, government, about assets and about land. Anything, and I mean anything, that is deemed surplus, there is a demand from the centre to see that come under the centre's control, the centre's management. Okay? So I'm just trying to give you a flavour, of the reality and context that we are working in trying to balance these competing priorities. But as I say, if we build a new site at Airlie Top, there is still the matter of the PFI and the commitment that was signed long before anybody was in this room to pay for that until 2060. It doesn't go away.
Okay, well, while we're on the topic of funding, can we get another point on the funding, please? Margaret Overend. Margaret Overend. Margaret in the room? Yeah, can you get microphone to Margaret, please? So following on from what we've just heard about the PFI funding, Margaret.
We've had a lot of figures bandied around since this consultation started, and I'd like to ask, how much is this entire project going to cost? So £500 million has just been mentioned, and yet we're told, I think I'm right in saying, the local care strategy, which is part of this, hasn't yet been fully devised. We're being told that we won't know until it gets started how much it's going to cost the ambulance service. I haven't even heard how much each extra ambulance journey is going to cost. So, how robust are these figures that we're talking about, and particularly in light of the uncertainty that there seems to be around the economy in the pretty near future? And the second part of the question is, what's your contingency plan when this project, as it inevitably will, busts the budget?
Okay, Dr.
Are we going to borrow more money, or are we going to actually cut back on the things that you're talking about in this plan?
Dr. Matt Watt.
Okay, so in terms of the high level numbers, we've talked about those numbers this evening, and I'll remind you of the numbers. So somewhere in the region of £270 million worth of capital required to deliver the change to the hospital estate that would be necessary to deliver this model, and somewhere in the region of a £200 million requirement to close the deficit. In fact, we don't quite close the deficit even with that contribution from the centre, and I think that speaks to the concerns that you've raised today about whether we're investing enough as a nation in the NHS. There's, I think, nobody on this panel who wouldn't agree that more should and could be forthcoming when you compare the willingness of this country to invest in its health service with other similar industrialised nations. You will see that we are not making the same level of contribution here, but that's a political with a big P issue. Sure is, okay, and there's no distance, I think, between the panel and the audience in relation to that set of questions. What we've brought forward is high level, and admittedly high level. And if we progress, then there's a much more detailed piece of work that we need to do that would generate what's called a final business case, where we would be obliged, because we're essentially putting a business case together to attract funding from the centre to address that big financial challenge that I talked about a minute ago. So that final business case needs to be much more detailed, and we need to map out much more precisely what are the estate's requirements, what will the workforce requirements will be, and in that we'll also have to pick up issues like the investment that's required to deliver the additional capacity in the ambulance service, for instance. That would need to be part of all of that. I want to remind you all that the ask that would be coming forward in those terms is alongside the recurrent allocations that the CCGs manage to purchase services, to purchase activity, and that at the moment totals somewhere in the region of £300 million, there or thereabouts, which is our annual spend on services in Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust. Fundamental to the model that we're talking about is how we redesign the way that we spend that money. Fundamentally, that's underneath all of this. Care Closer to Home is about using that recurrent allocation, the recurrent funding that we get, in a way that better meets people's needs by delivering care close to home and better invests in prevention services. We need to keep people well, and we need to invest in more services in the community setting to enable us to do that. So the final business case will be the process. Generating that final business case will be the place where we're able to be more precise. At the moment, we would admit that the figures that we're talking about are high level. They're accurate reflections of the costings that we've got, but there's more detail that we need to raise.
Still haven't answered that lady's question fully.
I believe I have, but if that's...
Well, I'll tell you what you haven't answered.
Yeah.
You've already said you're struggling with £10 million a year debt, and you now coolly tell us you're going to borrow another 500 million. You say you can't afford the 10 million, but now you've got to pay another 500 million back. That lady asked you what other services you were going to cut. But you haven't answered that question, so what are you going to cut to balance the books?
I'm not going to answer that question because we've not made any determination about cutting services. What we're talking about here is changing the way that services operate. And,
How many less nurses?
How many less nurses? We're going to have to, if we move forward with these propositions, then we're going to have to change the way that our workforce operates. We need to make sure that people who are currently working in a hospital setting are able to be flexible in the way that they work.
You're going to privatise nurses out of job. You're going to put unqualified people into privatised locales, etc. Who aren't audited, just like it is now, just like it is in mental health. Why is it going to be any different?
Okay, Margaret, we're not planning to do that at all. We're planning to redesign the way our services. Margaret, it was your question. What's your response to that, please?
Well, my response is, if we're talking, let's talk about around £500 million. But you seem to be saying that actually it might not be that, it might be less than that, it might be more than that. So how can we give you any sort of feedback on something that appears to be, I'm sure it's not, but appears to be a bit of a finger in the wind?
No, it's not a finger in the wind.
But you've not factored in these other things, which may cost an awful lot more.
We need to move through a process. Sorry.
I'm surprised that you haven't got, or you haven't started to think about a contingency plan, because these things do invariably go over budget, bust budget, and then decisions have to be made as to what, how you address that problem. And I think the mood of the meeting probably will be carried on from this meeting. And if you then come back and say, well, in order to get this thing through in the funding that we've got, we're going to have to cut X, Y, and Z, I think you're going to again face a lot of very angry people.
Sure. Okay, I think that point's covered. So we're running very short on time now. Maureen Davis. Maureen Davis, over here, please. Microphone. Maureen. Yeah.
Dr. Brooke has always stated that the pre-consultation over the past 3 years, that's 4,000 people out of 452,000, showed that people prefer care nearer to their home, in their local community. The proposed plan does not give the impression of this being available for the people of Greater Huddersfield. Care in the community at the moment is quite unsatisfactory. How is this going to be rectified, and who will measure and ensure that this is achieved? Are we in Greater Huddersfield going to have parity with Calderdale? Because you have the quality care and the vanguard, and there's been money put in for that, which Huddersfield, as far as I'm aware of, hasn't had.
Okay, Dr. David Hughes.
Right. Well, the answer to that is that it's by actually using this new model of care to enable us to have more finance to spend on care in the community. You're absolutely right. Huddersfield has gone through a process of care closer to home, and there's a contract that was signed and started with the community organisation Locala, which is only 7 months into its running. It's an enormous project. It's just phase one of what we're planning on doing. And there are a number of other work streams that are going to be looking at how we can actually provide care close to people's homes, in people's homes, where it is appropriate. We know that a lot of people at the moment are in hospital who don't need to be there. They're there often because we can't provide adequate services for them in the community. Some of that is money, some of it's staffing. I mean, in answer to one of the union questions earlier on, I think we're in a situation of total disgrace where a lot of the community services are provided with staff who have minimum wage, 0 hours contracts, no pensions, and actually we need, and then we're surprised that we can't recruit them, and we can't get people out of hospital, or we can't keep people at home because we can't have the right care packages. That is all part of what we need to do to make this work. And I'm on groups that are working over both Huddersfield and Calderdale, and also to a certain extent West Yorkshire, to see how we can actually redesign things so that hospitals are for people who need to be in hospital, and those who don't need to be in hospital, where nothing is added to their care, they're kept in the community. And that's not just GPs doing all the extra work, because if I stand up and say that, I shall have rotten tomatoes thrown at me by my colleagues, which I've done on a number of occasions. It's the totality of what we do in the community that we need to work on, and that is going to go alongside this plan.
Across the UK were going to be closed, and in the pyramid of patient advice, obviously your first point of reference is your pharmacy. But that's been taken away, and then your next point of reference, I assume, is either your GP or NHS 111, rather than rushing to A&E. I agree, a lot of people will go to A&E out of sheer frustration because they can't get doctor's appointments. Some people, I'm told, have to wait 2 and 3 weeks. That is very reliable evidence, that. So it is a concern. And I appreciate what you're saying, that people do need to have or request care in the community. I was really surprised. I think it's on page 36 that it suggests that you might bring x-rays and blood tests out into the community. And I thought when I read that, well, that's a strange thing. How cost effective could it be? People surely, if they're ill, go to hospital for x-rays. You wouldn't want them in the community, would you? Would you?
Yeah, okay. I've heard that before. Have I actually spoke to you on the information sessions? Yes, I did. No. Clearly, X-rays in the community is. I mean, I know there's X-ray facilities at Todmorden, but we certainly don't have any in Huddersfield, and we're not intending to be moving. We're not intending to be moving X-ray machines out of the hospital just yet. Blood tests certainly, because point of care testing is coming in now, where basically you can do most of the blood tests on a finger prick test. Like, you know, basically at the moment we only really do blood sugars for that, but we can do a lot more. So that will certainly come in the future as the cost of those come down. Just to go to your point about pharmacists though, I mean, most surgeries now, certainly mine being one of them, we employ one of our local pharmacists in Skelmanthorpe from the Well pharmacy just at the bottom at the beginning of this year, and he is now. Can I just say what's actually? I mean, that's been on the back of other people saying it's a good thing to do. He is now doing an awful lot of the medication work that I would have done before, so freeing up time so that I can see more patients. And I think you'll find there's many doctors' surgeries doing that now, where pharmacists can take over some of the workload that GPs currently do, and we can use that workforce. And I even know of pharmacists now that are actually holding their own surgeries, doing blood pressure reviews. Some of the more, some of the not the complex stuff that GPs do, But, you know, I think that I'm not worried about that workforce suddenly, you know, going off. I think they will be utilised fully in the new system.
Okay, and actually, just to add to that, our pharmacist is the one clinical group of the workforce where we do actually have an excess capacity of numbers. And you're also right, it is the first point of contact for many people, and there are more face-to-face contacts with pharmacists than any other. I think it's in the order of 400 million contacts a year, whereas it's 350 million in general practice. It's that order of magnitude. So it is a huge resource, and it is one that I think we could use more effectively.
Okay. Well, we did have Margaret's question, which went off on a little tangent about pharmacists, but Margaret, your reaction to what you've heard? Sorry, again?
I don't think it answers the question. I'm sure that the doctors are not surprised by the number of people who turn up at A&E who shouldn't be there, because of the panic, because there's no structure in the local community of who to approach for advice.
Well,
and it's anecdotal that I think it's brilliant that you've got a pharmacist in your surgery, Dr. Alderson, but we're just talking about one here and there. You need to know where the 24-hour pharmacies are close to you and so forth, but that's just a small thing, because you could go on to the services of district nurses, difficult to arrange, and so forth, and home care. It's not up and running. My question was, how is this going to be rectified, and who will measure and ensure that it's achieved? Because in your survey it says that most people wanted care closer to home, but they didn't want you to start any alterations until that was established. So how will you or we know when that care in the community has been established?
Can you do a final answer on that?
It will be measured by the CCG, and that will be something that gets fed back to the CCG board by the individual practices. We have a quite sophisticated system whereby if I as a GP have a service which is unsatisfactory from the district nurses, I can report that to the CCG, and then the CCG collates those opinions. It's not the only source of feedback, but it is a very useful one. There are key performance indicators that the community provider, which is Locala, has to actually fulfil. And although when it first started it was far from ideal, my experience on my patient's behalf is that it is very great deal better now than it was 6 months ago. And we are moving forward there, and I think things are getting better.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is the problem that with getting so many funds from the government, is that a problem because we no longer want NHS, we're all a little load of trusts who are competing for the funds instead of standing together and standing up for their patients and demanding the money?
Okay, well I think that's a big question to take forward for the panel tonight. We said at the start,
we remain determined to follow through the things that we're planning in the Vanguard, whether it's externally funded or not. It is being our existing funding is being used for that. Certainly, Calderdale have experimented with a number of care close to home initiatives, which you've heard about. The Quest nurses have maintained a lot of people in nursing and residential homes, but we've also got people supporting much more with end of life to enable people to die at home when that's their choice and when they're coming to the end of their lives. But we also know that 50% of the footfall at the hospitals of patients were actually for outpatient reviews. Now, a lot of those are not very functional because people have got more than one thing wrong with them, but they'll be going to a different clinic for different long-term conditions. We certainly foresee in all of this many more of those people delivering the care, probably specialist nurses coming out into the community to deliver the messages to patients and discuss what happens. Because one of the most influential things that I've learned talking to people through our information sessions is the amount of time that people are exasperated by a breakdown in communication, long gaps between investigations, and actually getting results. Long sort of periods of time where they're not sure what's being planned for them. I wanted to be more involved in the management and bringing that service out of the occasional visit to outpatients and into the community, I think can only serve to improve that.
Okay. Well, we said tonight we were going to try and get through 26 questions. By my count, we've got through around 20 of them. So thank you for your questions. I think I would like to thank the panel for their time tonight. So that's Steve Ollerton, Alan Brooke, Carol McKenna, Matt Walsh, Owen Williams, David Hughes, Mark Davis, Joe Middleton, ladies and gentlemen. This is clearly a process that will go on. I know that the panel wants to hear from you. That's one thing that's been stressed over and over tonight. There are materials on the desks as you leave tonight which will enable you to continue this process. And I know the panel have got some hard decisions ahead of them. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
I believe the price of betrayal